So, welcome to lunch. What are you eating? You're in a different time zone than me. So, I ate before I came on, and now I'm drinking water. It is water, I promise. Yeah, but that's it. So, I love that we're all here together. I got a few messages this morning from people who aren't going to be able to make it today last minute. But like a common theme in the world for entrepreneurs and humanity, like everyone's an entrepreneur to some capacity for me. I've never met somebody who I couldn't see them running a business. So that might be my personal bias, but I always think everyone can go and organize an impact in the world. Like every single person that was born is here to create an impact, and there's a way to organize ourselves to go make that happen. So that's how I move in the world. When I was 4 years old, I would I lived on a campus in a religious community, and mixed results from living in a commune type community. But anyway, in that, I would go up to strangers at 4 years old, and I would ask them for a nickel. And I collected all of those nickels. And when you ask for a nickel and they're like, wow, here's this little child who's asked me for a nickel, oftentimes they would give me much more than a nickel because I had the guts to ask for 5 cents. So I took that 5 cents and I would go and I gathered all the kids in the neighborhood and I went to the bookstore that sold candy and I wanted a ring pop. I wanted a ring pop so bad, but ring pops were like $1 in this particular space. The markup was really high in 1979. And I mean, that's ridiculous. What is that, like a $20 ring pop? What would that be now? It was insane. But I felt like I needed $1. I had no idea how many nickels that was, but a nickel was what I knew to ask for. Gathered all the kids in the neighborhood. Well, over the course of the day, I had collected so much money that we went and bought out the candy store with like a bunch of things, a whole variety. And we set up a table in the garage of one of my neighbors. And then we sent kids off all over the campus and got people to come, and we resold all of that candy at 3 times what we paid for it. At 3 times, 4 years old. 4 years old. So by the time we were doing that, I realized that I had shared so much of the money and I'd shared so much of the profit with everybody. I wasn't actually going to get a ring pop by the end of the day because now there were too many kids involved and too many personalities. And I actually was pretty shy, despite how self-assured I was. Self-assurance is number 11 for me. So by the end of the day, I'm like, I may not get the ring pop. And I remember this feeling in the pit of my stomach. I've worked so hard. I've organized this entire thing and I may not get paid. I'm still talking about 1979, although sometimes it feels like that was August. Sometimes it's confusing, 79 or yesterday. So literally, this is the whole scenario. And then I see my grandfather come in. He was the pastor of the church. Big Cadillacs pull in. And he was in front of a room, like all of these guys in suits out in the parking lot. And I knew if I could get my courage up to ask my grandfather for a nickel in front of all of these men in suits, it would cause something to happen, and I wasn't sure. But I knew that's what I had to get my courage up to do in order to get the ring pop. So I walk up there and I ask him like this, like I'm going to tell you only and nobody else. And I asked him, and he looks at everybody around and he looks at me and he hands me an entire dollar bill. He passes me a dollar bill and they're all laughing, and I go and I get the ring pop. And I feel victory because I have like literally worked, and in my memory, it's all day. It was probably like an hour endeavor, but I go back into the house and my brother looks at me and he wants it. He's crying. He's 3 years younger than me. He wants it. He's a baby. It looks like a pacifier. He wants it. And my mom looked at me and is like, where did you get the money to buy that? And I told her the truth. And when she heard that I had asked my grandfather for the money, she took the ring pop out of my hand and gave it to my brother. And I remember sitting on the dryer and I was just like, this whole thing didn't work out as I planned, like again and again and again. But when I look back at my younger self and the strengths that I had, even as a child, that capacity, beyond that, I sold talcum powder that I made out of bricks and whatever. Like I had a lot of businesses as a child. But like this particular story, when I look at like, how do strengths play? Where do they start? We're all gifted with certain things. You've been around a long time. You've accomplished some things. And even when you were a kid, how you played and how you showed up in the world before anyone told you who you had to be, there was a level of courage there that was fierce. There was a level of courage there before the world told you to play small or to play in this way, in this path, with these rules, with those people. There was something there, and it's time to go back to that. Ultimately, like your flow without what the world did to you, without your story, without your trauma and all of that, there's something in there that's still available to you. And how I have decided to context all of my strengths work in this new season in light of the pandemic. I'm doing less. You see me, I'm like, I'm not online as much as I used to be, because that's the best thing for Kate and Kate's family and Kate's clients. It's the best thing for me, is to not constantly be trying to interpret what the world is telling us to be. And I'm also taking some courageous leaps, because I remember I've come back to what it took for me to take a big leap of asking the man in charge for the dollar. Like, I have to come back into the courage that got me started in this life. It's really hard to do when I'm constantly turned and tuned into what's happening in the world. Now, there's also a level of privilege that I had in that moment. We've used our privilege in different capacities. I'm a white woman from New England, and my family were colonists, like coming over. Ultimately, they were pastors on the Mayflower. And so, like, I've reconciled as we look at all of the movements in the world, I've reconciled part of that story and understanding what part are strengths and what part is privilege and what part is, so that my listening is open, and I'm questioning some of how I've listened and interpreted what we were taught in the world as well. How many of you are with me? Like, you're looking. We got to look. That's one of those things that have come this year. Another thing that I've noticed in this world is that the glorified hustle that I have, and what got my business built and how all of that business was put together, doesn't actually work for me when things are this insane everywhere and there's this much uncertainty. So yes to the courage that got me started. Yes to examining what my strengths look like in their awesomeness, and also what my strengths look like when I'm not connected to the interconnectedness of all of us, because that's what privilege does. Like, if I forget that we're connected, or I'm moving or influencing in a capacity without inviting people in that interdependent way, which is what we'll get into in a moment, my strengths show up in a different way. Your strengths show up in a different way in that. So to be in the flow, the best thing that you can do for yourself in this moment, when there's things you can control and things you can't, you're not here today to learn how to control more. That's not what our work does together here, but like, we're not coming together to figure out what can we control so we can have more certainty. Today, we're going to make friends with, like, I'm awesome and not awesome. My strengths were great when I built this business together. And then when I have to homeschool my son, my strengths are frustrated because I didn't account for this interruption. And then I'm like, oh, in my heart, I'm like, this is an interruption? Taking care of your family is an interruption? How many of you are getting me? Like at the end of my life, I'm going to be glad I had this extra time with him, if I can stop resisting it. When I worked a lot in the hospital in my 20s, helping people transition to the other side. And so I've been with people on those end of life conversations. I didn't just read it in a blog. And that really grounds me. It grounds me to remember what will be most important at the end. So there's that side of it. And it really grounds me to remember who I was before the world told me who to be. And in between there, I did spend 10 years in a wheelchair. I am having medical treatment right now in order to sustain, just to be alive. So in between there's a lot of story, but ultimately there's who we were made to be, what we're designed to be without the influence of everything else. And where do you want to end up on the other side? In between there is a flow. And to make friends with what your story is and what happened on the between those bookends of you beginning and you ending, in between there, we want to embrace that we have weakness. We're going to get into the specifics of that. We do. You need to know what to do with that. And you're forgetting right now how awesome you are, because your brain's telling you you're less than awesome, because this entire time that you're in pandemic, you're doing amazing. You know exactly what to do and who to be. but you keep telling yourself you have to be the version of you that you were before this started. How many of you can relate? Like, I want to be her. I want to be the one who set up all these amazing things and made these great partnerships, who had the big idea and knew exactly what to do. When the fact is, like Saturday morning, I'm like, what's my name? Do I have to do that? Are they waiting for me? Who's waiting for me? Like, how, you know, like there's just, you're going to need more help than you have right now. And you're not gonna be able to do everything. So that's another thing, right, to make friends with. So inside of that, I want to show you, I'm going to like land the plane now. Now you get why I'm here. Welcome to lunch. We're just going to keep it really light today. Don't worry. I'm going to share some slides because some of you are new to strengths, and I want you to understand when I say strengths, what I'm talking about. And if you already know about strengths, then what I'd like you to do is ask me for my slides after and make them better and go use them. Everything that we create is for sharing. So like, I want you to get really good at supporting people to remember who they are and who they were before the world told them who to be. I want you to help people be able to observe their story and observe what happened in between and get really clear on who those 5 people that are going to be with them at their end of life and what they're going to be proud of. That will help them live with no regret. I think, like, really, my whole work is equipping people to do that so that you can encourage, you can hold space, you can educate, and you can help people rise up to whatever it is they're here to do. And in the process of that, in this flow, it's a lot of healing, and we all do healing differently, and there's no one way to do that. Right? How many would you agree? Like, and there's season of your life where certain coaches that you had worked for a season and it was amazing, and then you need to go get other teachers. And then, you know, when that, they're like, okay, those are the right teachers for that. That was aligned, and now I need new teachers. So that's, I hope that that's what you do as you move forward. You're going to need more teachers. And then you go back to, sometimes you go back to the other teachers because it's time again, and that works. But trusting your flow, when you're in alignment with yourself and you understand who you are and who you were made to be and what you want, it's easier to make those decisions on where do I do my learning, you know, what should I be working on and being with what is. Okay, so let's open up some slides. I may have, you know, a child coming in and out of here, which I don't apologize for, and which I just learned how to not apologize for that. I had somebody comment on there. They're like, "You're so gracious when your son comes in." I'm like, yes, yeah, you can be gracious or not. This is the reality. So let's go back to the beginning of strengths for a second, just to remember to land the plane. And so what I've just shared with you is like, my belief is you're unique and you're powerful, but there's data to prove that. There's data to prove that. So let's just take a poll here. Raise your hand if you can't sit still during video meetings. Is that you? Who can't sit still during video meetings? Okay, I've adapted these. These are not the normal slides. I just tweaked them a little bit. Yes, can't sit still during video meetings. Fantastic. Okay, if you always start the day by making a list, that one just stays the same. Those of us that are list builders before pandemic are still list building. So, yeah, maybe the technology has changed. Share your favorite list making system in the chat box if this is you. What are you using as that changed? How many of you miss talking to strangers at the grocery store, in an airport, or at the post office? Yeah. You know what's been hard for me is my way of creating connection out in the world. I was taught to smile, like I'm a hostess because my parents have a restaurant. I can't tell people smiling, but now I'm like really focused on eyes when possible. And then I also know that that makes me look a little creepy. So it's like, you know, because they got their mask on, and I want the eye contact now. Before, I just had like this veil of I smile as I go out and move in the world, and that's like my shield of protection. And now it's just different. So you may have noticed that as well. Raise your hand if you're excited to be locked up in your own house for a whole year. Yeah. Like they said 2 weeks. What's going on? They said 2 weeks. I had travel plans, training in corporate all over the place, and that was all canceled. And I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it. I'm glad that I'm home. How many of you cry while you're watching movies and TV shows? How many of you never used to cry? Like, it's unlike you, but you're crying in movies and TV shows suddenly during pandemic, but never before. Yeah. Okay, great. Raise your hand if you designed a 3-point pivot for your business plan for the next 24 months. Yeah, like, have you planned out like what's happening in the world and in the economy? And you're like, if it goes this way, I'm doing this. So there's a certain strength set that thinks in that way. A lot of times it's high deliberative because they can look at risk. Sometimes it's just strategic, but like you just know, you know how to move. Josephine's raising her hand. Is strategic number 1 for you? I think so. Yeah. Yeah. We know what's going to happen. We're going to go this way and then we're going to go that way. Awesome. Okay, great. How many of you are still trusting your intuition? Yeah. Awesome. How many of you would love to come back into the trust of your intuition? Also a thing. Yeah. So again, with strengths, the reason we do this work on a data level, other than it's super fun and Kate's a little weird, but she's cool, is it does actually, the longer you're in it, increase your results in your work engagement, your team's engagement. These are real statistics. So this isn't something I made up in a commune. Like literally, this is data driven. Although if you have a commune, I'm happy to come speak to it because I have a lot of experience. I just want you to consider that investing in yourself, investing in your team does work out. Like the data produces, like the data will work out. And if every day you can cultivate what it is that you love in that joy zone once a day, your depression, anxiety will improve, your life's going to improve, your productivity will improve if you can figure that out. What gives me joy shifted after I did some healing work this year. What gives me joy shifted. We're not fixed. So even though we have talents, your joy isn't fixed, and you can change and you can grow. The world will change and grow. Nothing is ever stationary. So you're allowed to change and grow and use different strengths in different seasons as well. Remembering like how unique we are. If you don't know this data and you're working with people, 1 in 33.4 million people have the same strengths, the same top 5 talents in the same order. A talent is basically a talent times investment, means you invest in that particular talent. 1 of the 34 equals a strength. So if you're not investing in your talents, it's not necessarily a strength. It can also be a liability. Something to consider. And in the journey of whether it's your leadership journey or your entrepreneurial journey in that capacity, let me see if I can increase the screen here. There is something on this line. This would be more of a spiral. I've got a few people working on it because I don't like the shape of a straight line. Nothing is a straight line, but we kind of hop all over this map. And I want you to look at that big yellow triangle as like some kind of interruption that happened that you were not in control of. I've used this slide for 2 years, but this was a really big interruption because also the way things are organized in the world are shifted, and your way of moving, like your freedoms were handicapped a little bit. So not only did an event occur where you couldn't just be motivated and focused in your tools and whatever, but now the things that you counted on to be who you want to be are, it's interrupting your flow. How many of you can relate? Like, oh, I had to change my plans. There's new information. Some people lost jobs, some people gained jobs. Some people's businesses are taking off and skyrocketing because it's the right moment. Some people have decided, who cares about doubt, identity, and conflict now? I'm just going to do it because I don't have much time. Or I'm finally ready to go release my work into the world because people are hurting, and it's like they've been activated in such a profound way. Other people, depending on where you are, like you forgot who you were. You're like, I don't even know if I can do any of this anymore because I've educated myself about our systems. I've educated myself about what's going on in the world. And like, I've seen behind the curtain now on some things, and I can't go back to doing business like I used to do it, or I can't do business with the organization that I was doing before because I've seen things I can't unsee. And I don't want to be a part of things that aren't helping everybody. Or I want to examine within myself what's there. These are all the conversations that I hear on a daily basis. Yes, some people are like, I'm still doing the same business and I just need a new plan. But the majority of people are like, I'm ready to shake some things up and I want to change the world because this didn't work well for everybody. And I want everybody to have a seat at the table. Other people are that don't have a business, like, hello, like, what about your mom? Where's your mom on here? She's leading her life too. Where's your mom? Where do you get to have those conversations? Where's your neighbor? How's your mailman? And people that don't have a resource or that kind of support, they get lost here. Let's talk about them for a second, because you're impacting, your stakeholders are all around you, your kids. And what happens when the world breaks up, and what my interns and my kids that are in college and adulting, their first response when something happens like that is that they did something wrong. And you may be experiencing this too. I might be doing it wrong, or what are the new rules, or what, like this fear that it's something is wrong with them because they don't know who they are yet. How many of you have college kids? Yeah. So in this process, we're also like, for if you're a parent or you have college kids or you're mentoring people who don't have that level of emotional intelligence, they haven't had the privilege of some of that education. We start with like what's right with them so we can encourage them for a minute, but without putting labels on who they are, right? We don't put labels on who they are. We want to look at like what's right. So that's where I'm like, figure out who you were before the world told you who to be. And then in the conflict of that, everybody that you're working with is having an experience. So how many of you have noticed the people that you're working with are coping well some days, and are other days not so well? Turns out they're human as well. And maybe even the leaders you respected and followed need a day. They need a minute. Or you're like, wow, that was not what I expected. And part of you is like really glad it turns out they're human. Ah, thank God. And then part of you are also slightly going, well, if they're not doing okay, like, you question yourself for a second. If that person's struggling, maybe I should be more afraid than I am, or I need more information, or I need somebody else, because we love to put people up on pedestals and we want them to die there perfect for us. We love to put people up on pedestals that we see in charge or in control. We don't like when they show their humanity, we're horrible to them as a culture. Like we want them to like keep it together, have something to aim for, but like, hello, they're human beings as well, and they can't all the time. And they also probably have a little low-lying depression or anxiety. They haven't had human touch. And there's if you're in leadership, you need confidential spaces for you to be able to name that. You need a place to be able to go and dump that someplace, because people are counting on you. And it's not always appropriate to pass that down. So you need to make sure that you're taking care of your container. It doesn't mean go promote that to who you're leading or in the world, but go make sure you're cared for. I mean, for me to show up today, I've hired like 3 of the people here were paid to come. I'm just kidding. Maybe a couple. No, maybe it was 3. I'm looking across the board here. I might have paid 3 of you to be here. But like literally, like for me to show up, it took me a minute to figure out how I wanted to do that, because I needed to listen for a bit, and I was unlearning a lot of things. And that's okay that I take my time with that, because people are counting on me. I'm not like, no apologies for us. I had one person say, why you just like hit on social media? I'm like, I'm busier than I've ever been, but I don't know what I want to say yet. And I don't mind not saying anything. And they're like, but you're a marketing coach. Part of your business is marketing. Absolutely. But I've built so much trust capital. My business doesn't rely on social media to fulfill it, because I actually do relationship. So social media is the way I tell the story when I feel like being seen. But if you build trust capital with people, you don't actually have to show up visibly in that way. You can start, there's a way to do it, to set that system up. Wow, that's amazing. Thank you, bud. Thank you. We have a guest star. So when we keep looking through, is there some training we need to do? I would love to buy the book Emotional Intelligence 2.0 for everyone here, so you have a starting point, but I'm not going to do that. So I'm just suggesting, like, you do want to know, like, do I have emotional growth? So let's talk about weakness for a second. So strengths and weakness, but here's what weakness is amazing. You can diagnose what weakness and learning you need to do. You can diagnose it. So number 1, when you notice you're feeling less than confident, when you notice that not only are you feeling less than confident, but you're not performing as well at activities as you'd like to. How many have experienced that right now? I may not be performing as well, or I wanted that to go differently, or there's parts that are good, or you're struggling to get the focus and keep the focus. That's a common thing. There's stuff happening in your body. You're feeling overwhelmed. You've lost interest in your business. All of those things are there. That doesn't mean that's weakness. There's also like a mind and a body and a spirit and a soul. There's lots of other things engaged. But if it was weakness, here's how you know. Here's 3 things, super easy. Number 1, your strengths are in overuse. That means the autopilot, which is your top 5 strengths, usually. There's like, you will survive. Like that's how you survive. So your survival skills are just moving. And here's how that looks. So as a coach who supports a lot of people, I had 30 clients earlier this year. I'm doing a lighter load now. But earlier in this year, when I started the year, I could keep 30 because they alternate. That's max for me. And I looked at that, and when all 30 were like fight or flight, well, the people I work with are like, we're gonna fight. They don't run. So the adrenaline buzz of like 30 people, which turned into 1,000 people, because then I got people coming from last year, from the year before, from the last 8 years, from 17 years ago, re-emerging, trying, can we just have coffee? How you doing? I'm like, I know what how you doing means. How you doing means you want to dump it here. And I love that we have that trust. And yay, that worked. But 1,000 people, it wasn't 1,000, it was more like a couple hundred. But you know what I mean? It's like, I'm like, that is a lot of adrenaline. And I embodied the adrenaline. And then I was like, for a while, I'm like, I'm concerned and I'm listening and I'm listening and I'm listening. And I start swallowing all of this and it has nowhere to go. It has nowhere to go. Because it was so fast and so quick. My survival is to listen and nod my head and provide care and safety. But I lost touch with myself for a minute. It was so much all at one time, everywhere. It was too much. Anybody relate? Like you're like, and this identity that my strengths have in my top 5, which is connectedness, that connection. So I felt it. Strategic, I'm the planner. Individualization, everybody's going to go through pandemic uniquely. I get that. Arranger, let's just coordinate it. Let's keep it going. And maximizer, let's make it better. Relator, futuristic, learner, empathy, achiever. And I was like, this is great. I can survive pandemic. Fantastic. However, I couldn't actually take all of that adrenaline on. Like I had to like remodel how this work is going to go. Because there's no way that all of your clients can hit crisis at the same time. And with the level of support I was providing, it's not humanly possible. And they don't expect it either. But it was my autopilot. So I kept saying, yes, thanks for showing everybody your shoes, but go get your scissors and cut it. Okay. It's awesome. We're going to grandma's in an hour and he's like ready to go. So when you notice that, when you look around, what does your autopilot look like in pandemic? So think about your top 5 strengths. So that's 1, overuse. So my way of doing it. And I got vigilant. I got courage. I took risks. I also made some bad moves. I made some bad moves for myself. How many of you made some bad moves this year? You're just like, took on too much or something else. I just like, wow, that didn't go. And then what I noticed when that happens, when a move doesn't go the way you want it to go, that inner dialogue, I'm like, what am I, 16 again? Are we really coming back into this headspace? Am I 16 again? Because that's what vulnerability does. Vulnerability reminds you of who you were afraid people are going to see you as. So that little voice in your head that's like, because you got to prove you care. You got to prove you're on top of it. You got to prove you're XYZ. Everybody has something they're proving. I'm kind. I'm friendly. I'm on top of it. I don't know what yours are, but think about that for a moment and write that down. Like, what is it you like? What were you afraid people were going to see if you were honest about where you are? What are we hiding? We don't want them to see that. Another thing that happens with the overuse of the strengths is that put my neurological system back into a place that caused, a collapse in 2004. So I ended up in the highest pain that I've been in since 2004, naturally. My autopilot can do that. Like that adrenaline for me, my sympathetic doesn't. I have reflex sympathetic dystrophy. I don't have the parasympathetic. I have to engage it and invite it. It doesn't come on its own. I have to call it up and be like, hey, you want to go out? You want to have a dinner? I got to woo the parasympathetic in order for it to function. It's automatically not available for me. And so, but it takes me a minute to recognize that because I'm very content with survival. I can tolerate it. I'm so used to it. A lot of you are right there with me. You're like, you just autopilot all day and you make money doing autopilot and it rewards you, so you stay there. And that's what you've decided is well-being until it doesn't work. Until you're tired, until you burn out or you take a break or you need a hiatus or you lose interest. So it's like we all have to be aware of that. That's like we have to be sympathetic and parasympathetic, both of those going. So yay, we all survive, but we do lose touch. We do lose touch and need tools to stay engaged with the body. So that's overuse. Underuse. Most of you focus on your top 5 strengths because you feel awesome when you're confident and competent. Like, woo, I'm my 1 through 5. I had somebody message me, does 6 even matter? Because we're talking about the assessment as 34, right? Well, I don't hold these religiously. It's a way I inventory for myself. So I'm like, what is my number 6? Well, if you focus on the needs of 6 through 10 or what those talents are, it's amazing in terms of like you have all 34 strengths if you can learn, if you cultivate them, just some are more natural to you. But what I really found helpful when I think of underusing was that there were needs of 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 I'd never explored before. That most people are like, they're like, what, number 11? Nobody talks about number 11, but hey, 11 has needs. It just helps you get a more full picture of what your flow looks like to embrace all of yourself. So you imagine you have 15 people up in your head in your board of directors. There's 15 beautiful people there. And they're all different personalities. One of mine is a colonel. And I think it's my strategic strength. It could be maximizer, but it's like, it's a colonel and it's like literally like, it's so good and so on and fights. Like it's such a fighter. It's protected me through so much. It's stubborn as all hell. My mom would say my chin would go out. I'm like, that's the colonel. And so I like looked for an image online of like, what's the physical representation of that? And then I hired somebody to look at my business like to see the forest through the trees this year so that I could scale in a way that felt good to me. And it turns out she was an Army colonel for 20. Like literally, like called it right in. I'm like, you're the perfect person for this. It's so awesome. But like literally your board of directors, and you can go find people that fit those descriptions too and have meetings with them. They'll love it. But you have to understand that if you're looking at you want to be strategic and you want to optimize to hit your goals or optimize for well-being, you need to take a creative path there perhaps and look a little bit more fine-tuning at like all of these levers that are going for you. So underuse, there's talents you're not even aware of, you haven't studied them yet, or I didn't encourage you to do so, but I will be because Spark starts today. So there's a path of like, wow, there's like, if you could picture a stove and you always use those front burners because the back ones are kind of small. One of them doesn't light very well. It's a gas stove. That's what you think. Like you haven't figured out like, well, you could be in the same house and that back burner just doesn't light. You'd have to go get a match and a little thing or like a bamboo skewer. It's my way of getting in there without burning my hand and to light that back burner. But if you know like how that back burner lights, like and you're set up to go and do it, you can have 4 burners on at the same time and suddenly it's Thanksgiving. It's my favorite meal to cook. You're welcome to my house for Thanksgiving when the pandemic is over. Think about that. Are you running on all cylinders? Are you using all the burners on the stove? Are you doing the same thing? You're like, I'm a one pot trick. I'm like right here. I do everything in one pot. I got my Instapot. I plug it in. I don't even go in the kitchen anymore. I wash one thing. Like, great. That's great. But I need to make sure that you are going inward with yourself and helping others go inward, where you are curious about all of the burners and the inner working of your stove and the meal that you're going to create, and that you hold yourself sacred. Your needs sacred. This is a tool and a vessel, and it's an instrument, and it can be studied and optimized and cared for. It can have compassion and joy. It doesn't always have suffering. It's available. It's available for so much more. So much more. So underuse, get to know the back stove. Blind spot is number 3. Weakness can be blind spot. So blind spot is, some of you are sitting here and you're actually taking the Clifton Strengths test on your phone right now because I'm using crazy words and it's slightly interesting. She's a little funny, quirky. Maybe she's right. And you're over here and you're like, I'm going to take it now because I'm like, I at least want to know what I don't know. if there was something there. And you might be skeptical, you're going to take it, and you'll discover, does it work for you in the languages to whatever? Fantastic. Don't use the language. I can teach this entire class without ever uttering one of those Clifton Strengths words, because it just works. It's just true. Like, you are who you are, and there's a way to describe that. But I'm so curious about all of those talents, because when you think of the blind spot, most of you, when I say you have a blind spot and I see it, you're a little concerned. And here's why. Some of you have seen this before. This is the Johari window. There are things that you know about yourself, and we can both see them. Laura has pink on. Brandon has a collared shirt. We can all see that. Brandon sees it, we see it, Laura sees it. And you should meet if you haven't met. Make sure I make that happen. And then I see it, and it's hidden to you. There's some things I'm saying today, you're gonna be like, you're gonna ask me later. Hopefully she blogs about that, or I wanna come back to that. I wanna look it up. I would like the data on that. And then there's things that you see that are hidden in me, because it's a 1 hour lunch. I don't know. And there's even some of you are even more of an expert on some of these topics than I could even be here. We have doctors present, attorneys present. We've got like people who understand this. There's other coaches here who have a better way of talking about this. I'm okay with that. Please give us a class. We would love it. But so there's things that you see, and there's also some of you could not get out of bed today, and you look amazing, but you had to decide to get out of bed today. And maybe that happened for the first time in your life. And maybe that's been a thing, but now in this kind of environment, it might be more okay for you to own the confidence and the vulnerability in your profession. Some of you have pain that no one has ever known about or couldn't relate to. We don't know what it took for you to get here, to build your expertise. And then on this other path, there's things that are just hidden to both of us. So when we relate to other people in this space, knowing if we can have this Johari window idea of like I'm coming in with a curiosity about myself and about others. Wow, people seem a little more unstable. Things aren't as orderly as they could have been, or some things are like way too orderly because we actually need more foundations right now and agreements so we can all function. However you're experiencing that, I want you just to like put your hand on your heart for a second, or on your body, like be in your body. So do something, put your hand on your leg, on your back. You can do the vagus nerve hug. But let's just be with that of like, some things are worse than they were, and I don't know if they can get better. And some things I'm embarrassed to say, I feel shame that I want things different. I feel hope. But I'm not sure if it's appropriate to share hope. I feel pain, and I don't know if anyone cares that I have pain, because they have pain. So I don't feel seen. Some of you are feeling that. Some of you are feeling probably really misunderstood. Some of you are ready to be with the fact that you can no longer tolerate certain dynamics in your relationships or in the world. Let's be with that. Some of you are unlearning and relearning things that used to be easy for you, feel hard. And that's here too. Some of you are afraid. Some of you are struggling to feed your family. It's getting old. Some of you, your businesses took off and you feel guilt and shame that you're thriving and doing so well while others are not. And you're trying to figure out how to reconcile that. So that's here too. Do you feel like, as you take a collective breath for a second, all of this is happening all the time, but what connects us together, knowing that there's everything here, there's joy here, there's pain here, there's uncertainty, there's great certainty, there's faith, there's hope, there's doubt. All of those things are always here, but we have preferences about which ones we give our attention to. There are parts of your strengths that when they go into that overuse because you're triggered, there are parts of the dynamic of who you are when you're triggered. Like, I want to meet you on the day you're triggered, but I also want to meet you on the day where you surprise yourself at how easy something was. Like, I want to meet both of those versions of you. Some of you I only know in the trigger, and some of you I only know in the joy, because that's just how we play. But I want you to imagine that like both of those parts are you. And every person in your sphere has both of those days. My mom used to call them blue days and pink days. And she would tell me, she's like, you don't share your blue days with me. That was hard to hear. You look great, buddy. Thanks. I love them. Can you go running for a little bit and come back?
I just, the top coat is super slippery.
Oh, okay. Okay, try being on the carpet for a little bit and dig in. See if it fixes it. Okay. Here's Sebastian's. It's pretty fantastic. Thanks, bud. So we are both pieces of that. Like, I'm a trainer and I'm a mom, and I'm both. There's, like this is just a perfect timing, perfect entrance. So for all of you, I want you to imagine what your show looks like. And I'm going to actually do a little visual here. And this is what most of my work is about. But there's this place. Let's look at our vision and our show, and then we're going to do a little exercise. I hope what this is doing is springboarding some conversation, and then we can open up for some conversation. So remember here, if you haven't learned to draw this out, come back to me. You have a vision for your family, for your life, for your business, and you also have reality. And this line is a rubber band, and it pulls. Your vision is pulling you forward. Reality is pulling you back. It's always how it works. So current reality is like gravity. This line is gravity. Gravity does not need your permission or help during the day. When you wake up, the universe doesn't say, hey, Julie, you want to float today? You want to grow? Like, no, every day you wake up, gravity is there. It didn't invite itself. Like, it was just like it is, right? It's scientific. You can count on it until you can't, I guess, unless there's a button somewhere and we're all in the matrix. Like right now we have gravity. We can count on that every day. So no matter what your vision is, even if you're motivated and pumped up and inspired and you're helping people and you're changing the world, you got this amazing vision, you're going to wake up tomorrow and reality will still be there pulling away from that vision, which is why we have to do so much mindset work, right? And help others and figure out what inspires us, because the reality is always pulling, rubber band. And because it's pulling at times, if now you add pandemic to that reality, you add like structures are changed, people are unhappy, people are scared and terrified, that reality, it shakes up, it's pulling harder against your vision. Some of you are like, that vision's not even worth moving forward. Your vision wasn't strong enough to get you up in the morning to fight, to keep going, because when that reality hit, you're like, I'm bored with that, or that's not enough to get me up. You didn't have big enough why. And that's why you're frustrated, or you didn't, or you need to add a little bit to the vision in order to help you engage to that level. You need to, or you might need to do something different, or take your skills and add something to it. But inside of that, when everything is there, here we go, like right before you make it to your vision, it gets super intense. Super intense. The tension is greatest right before you're there. They call it the 6-foot rule. The tension is greatest right there. And so what happens is, when we look at from a strengths perspective here, this is your show. You will find your overuse patterns here. Unmet needs. Weakness shows up here. Vulnerability. And also, right here, if you can leverage this and optimize and do some work here, then you're going to find yourself getting there much faster. But it's, if you're curious about this, if you stop judging it, it's not going to take you out. If you are judging what you look like when on your blue days, when you don't look good, when it's messy, if you judge the mess, you won't make it to the vision. or you'll have less joy while you do it, because we're all about the B plus do equals half here. But if you can make friends with this and get curious about it and turn the volumes down on some of those strengths, use 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 for the first time, explore the back burner, you're going to have way more resource. And the other thing, those of you that work with me know this is what I'm about, is we were taught, capitalism taught us this is a single line and it's an independent journey. Bullshit. That was wrong. Yes, you can do it on your own coming through. That is not the way of the future. It's not going to be just you. That leaves people out. You need to widen it. You need more people on your team. It's not about you. You need to increase. Like if this was not a single line where it's all about you and your independent contribution, if you allow others to come with you and still give yourself that independent contribution time, because there are things that only you can do to move your business forward, but you got to widen the path. You got to take people with you. You got to ask them their ideas when you're vulnerable. Who are the people that are better at that than you? Partner with people who are so good it makes you look bad. It's terrifying. Or not terrifying. It's curious, it's exciting, and it's also like, oh, dang. But you're going to grow. You got to like change it into this growth mode and move forward, but widen that lane. And when I say widen the lane, it doesn't necessarily mean scale your team, but it means you have to increase connection. You need human connection in your weakness. You need to be seen. That's what creates that safety. That's what really supports us. If you can do that, look, you're not going to fall back down. You think you're starting over. You're not starting over. The only thing you have to get rid of is the judgment and get more curious, because you can optimize for that vision now, increasing the connection. Now, if you can't let the connection in when you're vulnerable, PS, trauma are how we trust each other and how we shut down trust. How we trust, how we shut down trust. I'm going forward with you. I'm making up in my head. I hope that you don't leave me. Okay, we're still here. You get to be the person, and several of you are that here for me, but like you get to be the person that doesn't quit on people when they are in their weakness. That gets to be you. You're not judging them when they're in their weakness, because then as they try, you're like, oh, they're still here and they saw my show. Yeah, we're still here because I have a show too, PS. We're still here. Are we doing this thing? Are we doing that vision over there? We're doing that thing with those people, with this product, or with this thing? Yeah, we're still doing that. Okay. Now, if they're not moving forward with you, or they're sabotaging. So sabotaging is when that shame takes over, or we all sabotage. You have a sabotage show too. So it's also the same thing. But I want you to consider that when you make friends and you recognize you have people in your corner who are like, hey, that's the other direction. You started walking backwards. You're not walking forward with us anymore. But we have built trust with people so they can say that to us in mirror, and they can go, wow, that was messy. But they're doing it without judgment. Then you're like, yeah, oh my gosh, I can laugh at myself. Wow, that was messy. You saw it and you didn't leave me. We're still here. Those are the people you're going to go to the end of the earth with. End of the earth. But now I have discovered this year that some people I thought I had that with, I didn't. How many of you can relate? You're like, oh, ouch. Thank you, universe. Thank you, God, for showing me that. That's okay. You're not meant to go to the end with everybody. That's codependency. If you're scorekeeping it and people are scorekeeping and they don't want to grow themselves, that's fine. You're not meant to go to the end of the earth with everybody. I've deliberately partnered with people who are clearer on that than I am right now, because I get confused and I want to go to the grave with everybody, and that's not my job. And I'm also not entitled to that. There's people I would go to the grave for who didn't invite me to their grave. And so like, also that's okay too. Like, I'm not entitled to it because we're in a conversation. I'm not entitled to your inner thought life because we're on the phone together. Like, I'm not entitled to that. But I'm here if you choose. Like, you're a chooser. I'm choosing. Just because we set the table doesn't mean everyone wants to eat. Like, that's okay. Like, so it's really, you can feel like if I'm not resisting and I'm not controlling and I'm being in their light, or I can dance with my strengths and my own energies, I can come back into my body. I can get the care I need. I can go again in there. but I got to widen the lane. I got to widen the lane. More human connection. We're going to break this down for a second for those of you that have to go though, because it's 12:54. We have 6 minutes left. My invitation for you is I'm teaching on the Spark content, on the strengths content in this deep capacity, like particularly on this optimization for the next 3 weeks. If you're not in the group, it's $30 unless you have a coupon from somebody who is already in the program. Everybody in the program can invite somebody for half price. So let me know. It's $30. Why is it so cheap? Because I don't know. Everyone's mad at me. It's so cheap. I'm literally going to be in there every single day. So just do it. It's the cheapest way. It's the last time I'm doing it in this capacity. We're bulking it up in a big capacity. And then from this, what I'm doing is every single day, I'm doing a video. There's a course you can go through on your own. It's a single journal prompt. There's ways to interact. We're going to be doing a couple of live classes to help you have these conversations with others and design new alliances so you can make that broad connection and have better conversations with your spouse, with your partner, and whoever. Those classes, we'll do a couples class. My husband comes for that, which is super fun. You're going to experience something super powerful when you can speak the same language with somebody that you care about. Some of you are like doing personal development in your own lane, and you're just praying the people around you catch on. And you're doing all the brain work and the analysis in your own head, making up what you wish they were doing. And that's not going to work out. Like eventually you got to enroll them into and stand for them to come with you. And when you're standing for them to come with you, not to take for them to learn in the way that you're learning or to learn the way you learn or be you and what you think is best for them. No, but you're standing for them to like say, hey, I'm going to witness you on your path. And I really love this. And I miss you being here with me. Different type of enrolling than like, hey, get your crap together. I learned all these things. It doesn't work like that. So there's a way of enrolling and being in relationship that invites people just because they're like, wow, you just are letting me be me. How did you learn to do that? That's usually the outcome that I hear from people. Wow, you're just letting me be me. I'm like, yeah, you get to be you. I don't have answers for you. I'm just a lot more work. It's complex in here. I'm seeing one question about flow in the joy zone, which is great. We'll open it for questions here. Flow and the joy zone. So the joy zone for me, let me see, I can actually share another slide about this. Let's see. Nope. Dun, dun, dun. Joy zone is about the accelerators. So this is one of the classes we do in Spark. The joy zone is that activity that you have highest energy with and you perform the best at it. That's your joy zone. Your flow is your relationship coming in and out of the joy zone, if that makes sense to me. It's like, this is the dance. I'm in it and I'm out of it. So flow is how I hold myself, the space I hold for myself and others while I'm in and out of performance. That's how I view it when I'm dancing in the confidence and the vulnerability. It's the experience of achieving that. It's the experience of giving it. You want the joy zone every day. This is definitely one of the classes that we do. Just to give you some previews of that. And let me add this one link here before people log off. Hold on one second. And Tina, if you can put a link to Spark in the chat box, it should be on my website. To give you, should be on my website. Anyone should be able to go there. And there's the link. If you and I haven't done a coaching session before, you haven't taken me up on one of my free consultations, there's an application here. I can't serve all of them, but I'm going to be generous this month because I carved some time for it. So fill this application out. You can also share it with somebody, give them the recording and tell them you got them in for this and then let me know. And so you can also share it if you want. It also works for couples. So if you want to come in with your spouse, you haven't done it with your spouse, you can use it for that, even if you've worked with me prior. But you can't come again unless you're bringing your spouse or your partner. Okay. Thank you. All right, let's open for questions. Wouldn't 21 days of this be getting real with the people in your life? It's a little intense, but a lot of it's fun. Spark is much lighter, but like we have to like name it all. We got to be real about what's really here. So let's open it up. Questions, feedback, opposition, celebration.
Kate, can we unmute and ask live versus
Yes,
chat?
please. Yeah, please unmute.
Back to the joy zone. I think we all want more of that in our day. And the reality is there are depleting activities that if you're a sole proprietor like myself, that we just have to get done, you know, like so how do you recommend balancing those out for the sweet spot?
So I sandwich them. Like in one sentence, the best thing that I could say is find something. So when you start your day and you make your list, don't try to do all the depleting activities in a row, which is what I used to do. I was so good at that. So I'd be like, here's a list of things like tax season. You're like, boom, I'm gonna get all this stuff done. I'm gonna get it done in 2 days. I'm gonna go. Like literally, that's what I used to do. How many of you can relate? Like I'm doing all. I'm like, holy cow! Like holy cow! Like why do we do that to ourselves? And then this last year, I hired a bookkeeping company, and I'm doing it every month, and I'm like, oh, like thank you, Brandon, for encouraging me to have a new relationship with my money, because like literally. I was something I avoided doing, or I was afraid I wasn't enough capacity to do it, to understand it in the capacity that needed to be understood, because I didn't have financial literacy growing up. My mom didn't even fill out a checkbook at that time. And so I was like, money is hard for me, and it's not in my joy zone at that time. And then I had a hard time receiving it as well. I love giving it away, but I wasn't great at receiving it. And so that was one of those things where having a business requires you learn about money. You learn about like you can't have a business without learning about money. Like literally, eventually that will catch up on you. And the stress was crazy. So I would avoid. So I start with what you're avoiding. And then like, if you want to start marinating in like, oh, how do I have a new relationship and how I'm operating this with these activities? You want to leverage a high joy activity. Like everybody think about it, type it in the chat. What's the highest activity that you do? Like greatest joy, greatest impact. Energy produces energy for you. So you're like, whoop, top of the thing. You go from there. And then when you're on that high, I go take a courageous action. I don't go to now here's the thing. If it's a highly focused activity, and my joy as a relationship person is like people and motivation and inspiration and like truths and like worship music and like all of that, I'm in this high of like, yes, I love this. I'm so inspired. I don't go from that to my checkbook. I'm probably not going to provide great skills of math addition. So it has to be aligned, but I will, when I'm in that place and my confidence is up, I will go make a phone call that terrifies me a little bit. Or I'll write that email. And because I'm not going to be in my head as much because my confidence is up. So that's a great activity to do. If I just did something depleting, you're going to laugh at this. I'm going to use money again as an example, just because it's the one thing that we all have in common. At least, I mean, other than having a soul and whatever. There's so many things we have in common, but let's use money. How many of you need to talk about money? You're like, I don't want to talk about it, but I should talk about it. But there's this thing with it that's like, my husband would bring me gummy bears. He would bring me gummy bears. There would be a reward every time I did the depleting of the activities I avoided. Like gummy bears was a thing. This is like 6 years ago. But it's like, what is the prize for doing the depletion? Now that may be another activity, or it could just be an award that you need. And literally, he would sit at the table with one right here in his forehead, because I made him mirror me. Like, I'm doing this for both of us, so you better participate. So, hey, I'm working on the taxes. You better be sitting here at the table with me, you know? Like that's how that went down. So he would just like stick a gummy bear right here on the third eye and sit there. And I'm like, yep, that's how it's going down. And he knows you're working on the thing. He's going to bring, well, now I don't eat gummy bears. So I'm like, I need something new, and probably not alcohol because pandemic. So not doing alcohol. So like, literally we're children. That 4-year-old girl who could ask people for a nickel, who like was reselling candy in the local grocery on a college campus of like 2,000 people, like literally like the courage that kid had. The courage that she had to do that. Like that, like I have to find her, and she likes gummy bears or whatever that is. Like you have to figure out what that is for you. And it's maybe you don't even tell anyone about what that is. That's totally fine. But like it makes you happy. Be more happy. Like do things that make you more happy as you're doing, like reward yourself for depleting. There's nothing noble in doing things that you don't like doing. And possibly a lot of you have a conversation in your head that you should be doing these depleting things, and heck no, find someone else to do it. Like literally there's people dying to be in your presence to do the things you hate doing, just to be in connection with you. They want it. Widen the table. And we call that designing alliances. And my recommendation, if your business is in that place, please invest in a designing alliance sessions with me, or I can find you someone else if I'm not the one that you align with. I'm not attached to that. But literally, you got to find that. And I'm a alliance hunter. This is like when you don't see me online, I'm out there making alliances for people, matchmaking them with services, with teams, with people, with networks, because that is my sweet spot. That's what I know to do. So I network with millionaires 2 days a week. I network with my mailman, the rest of the time. Like literally, I want to be everywhere that those are, because we need each other. That mailman is the greatest gift for my millionaire client this week. It's the greatest gift because we're all just people. We just have different amounts of energy, shifting value to things, but we're all just people. So I want you to think about that. You're probably thinking way too small. If you are detesting the activities you have, then you're probably controlling more than you need to. And there's just more fun to have if you let people in. So do your trust work. Other questions? Revelations, ahas, resistance.
Kate, can you tell us more about the 6 foot rule, like before the vision?
You want a story or you want the scientific?
The science.
Okay, just checking. So right before everything works out for you, you want to quit. So when you're ready to quit, there's entire books on this. For some people call it a 10-foot rule. For me, it's 6 feet. I guess it's the length of a human body for me. So that just means I need a contact with one more human before I get to the thing. So I use 6. Also 6 feet underground, like when I'm buried. But literally, like I want to quit. I'm dying. This is not fun. I don't like this. I don't want it. And here's my elaborate story of why it's not going to work out and why they shouldn't have chosen me. Or XYZ, like the stories you tell yourself to back out from the vision, why you're not enough, whatever. And everyone's is different. And for some of you, but usually at that point, we're not just quitting on ourselves, we're giving up on people to some degree. And we're right. Like literally, you believe every word that you're telling yourself in that moment. Like you totally do. And you're absolutely right, because that's the story that you have. Change the temperature in the room, move your physical space, work from someplace else, unplug from social media. Like you have to like literally unplug and be with that. I want you to exaggerate the quit. Like, I'm going to quit. I'm like, tell me why you're going to quit. That's what I'm going to ask you. Tell me more. Like, let it out, exaggerate it, put on the show, bring clowns if you have to, bring evil clowns. Like whatever you have to do, like emote the quit, let it out of the bag. And then find a 6 foot human being to connect to and keep going. There's a million reasons to quit. Everybody's quitting. You get to be the one who keeps going. Unless your vision isn't in alignment anymore, right? Like, as some of you, it's actually your fear is that you've signed up for something or in something that's not in alignment for you. You're not sure if it's your BS, or you're not sure if it's you sabotaging or if it's really not what you should be doing. Then that's a coaching conversation. Other questions? Awesome. Flow. How do you talk to yourself on your awesome day, on your less than awesome day? Increase your connection and help yourself move through. I hope that you come to Spark so we can stretch this learning out and get super curious. about how to optimize and start looking and drawing in all of those strengths that were a little high up that you don't know very well that you actually have access to. Also, I would imagine Gallup will be coming out with a report. This is not official. They don't give you that information, but we're going to discover that strengths have shuffled right now. And so we'll be using my strength sorting tool and a few others so that you're not, if you're using this language, you're not trying to make your autopilot perfect and into everything. Like, you know, you're so much more complex and dynamic for that. And hey, if you don't like the strengths language, don't use it. Like, seriously, but optimize. But that's it. I'm so glad that you were all here for lunch. I hope there was like a little tidbit that you want to share. The recording will be available. It will be on YouTube, and that link will be coming. I'm thankful that I have the opportunity to see most of you as we move forward. And please let us know what you need. And we're here to serve. We're making a lot of progress. We're making a lot of progress within the program to make things easier. One of my goals is to get off Facebook with my community. And so we're looking at lots of ways to do that, so you don't have to go through a landmine to get to the healing place or where you want to learn and grow. And so we're in that process right now too. So send us your feedback and we will talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody.
Kate, one other quick question for you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
The vagus